Good morning, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Tanya Robinson, and I am the Special Assistant to the President for Justice and Regulatory Policy at the White House Domestic Policy Council. And I am just tremendously excited about today's webinar, which will feature a list of experts, but also more broadly excited about the meaningful work that's happening in this space, including work at the federal level, but also at the state and local level to support children of incarcerated parents, their families, and their caregivers. Let me begin by thanking the Justice Department, and in particular the Office of Justice Programs, for their tremendous effort here and their foresight in pulling together this sort of webinar. As many of you may know, as the number of incarcerated men and women has grown over the past 20 years, so too has the number of incarcerated parents. According to a recent analysis by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, as of 2007, an estimated 1.7 million children under the age of 18 had a parent in prison, an increase of almost 80% since 1991. And the negative consequences of having a parent in prison can be quite substantial, including financial instability, changes in family structure, shame, stigma. These kids are the innocent bystanders of adult decisions and are too often forgotten in discussions of the collateral consequences of incarceration. Also forgotten are the positive benefits that familial ties can have on successful reentry. Research shows that supporting healthy and positive relationships between inmates and their families has significant reentry and other benefits, including reducing recidivism for the incarcerated parents and improving emotional adjustment and behavior for the children. To address some of the consequences of incarceration for the children of inmates and also to capture these reentry benefits, many of us in the federal family have thought long and hard about what more we can do to support this special population of kids and their families. That work culminated in a set of recently announced federal policy developments, as well as a recent Champions of Change event hosted at the White House that recognized individuals who are doing tremendous work in their communities, focused on children who have an incarcerated parent, individuals who are sponsoring mentoring programs, facilitating family visits, providing legal services, and the list really goes on and on. Their example is a powerful reminder of how much each of us can do in our communities to make a difference. And it's also why today's forum and other conversations on this topic are so important and so timely. I'm excited about the progress we're making in the federal sector and tremendously grateful to our partners both here at the Justice Department and again in particular at the Office of Justice Programs and at the other federal agencies that are enabling this work and serving as a force multiplier through webinars like the one hosted today. With that, let me say thank you for your participation. I hope that you'll find the conversation both constructive and inspiring. And with that, let me turn it over to Eugene Schneeberg, who is the Director of the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the Department of Justice. Eugene?
Well, thank you, Tanya, and thank you to all of you who have joined this very important webinar. I want to say how much I appreciate our colleagues at the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention for co-hosting this webinar with us. In particular, I want to thank Michelle and Callie from National Training and Technical Assistance Center for their help in pulling this all together. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our phenomenal presenters, Dr. Wilson Good, Liz Gaines, and Catherine T. Arena. So I, like you, I'm going to take out my pen and pad and looking forward to learning and gleaning insight from these wonderful presenters. So again, from all of us at the Department of Justice Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, we're thrilled to be able to bring this webinar to you today. And with that, I'll turn it over to our moderator, Michelle Duhart.
Thank you so much, Eugene and Ms. Robinson. I'm excited to join all of you today for this very worthwhile topic. Before we get started, I want to ensure that each of you should have received a copy of the PowerPoint, and I want you to note all the wonderful handouts that are in the handout pod there. Just so that you can get the full benefit of the webinar, I want to share a few things with you. To view the bios and the photos of the presentation panel, please access the Word documents, which are available now in the handout pod of the webinar dashboard. Numerous handouts will be referenced today that are also located there for your resource library. We also have additional resources that we were not able to host there, and we will be sending them to your attention following today's event. To send a chat message to me, your host, or another panelist or attendee, see the number 1. Please click the menu icon in the upper right corner of the chat pod, choose Start Chat With, then select Host, Presenters or Specific Attendees. 2, type your message into the text window, and then 3, hit Enter or click the message bubble icon to send. Most of you are pros at participating in these webinars, so you know exactly how this is done. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute and help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the name of the person registered and the total number of additional people in the room with you today. We certainly appreciate you joining as a group. It's certainly a lot more fun to participate as an office, and that also allows other folks to register. Again, this will help us with our final count. And again, if you are viewing with a larger group, please type in the name of the person registered and the number of additional people joining you today. There will be numerous opportunities for Q&A throughout the presentation today. Questions will be answered live as time permits during the question and answer session. At the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided with a link to take a 5-minute online survey about today's presentation. We appreciate your feedback regarding this webinar. This information is used to assist in future planning and training. You will be able to access the evaluation link on the last slide of the PowerPoint. For those of you participating as a group, when you return to your office, please enter the link on the last slide in your web browser to share your feedback. And finally, this event will be archived in OJDP's Training Center at www.intac.org in approximately 2 weeks. Again, thank you for joining us today. And if you hold for a second, we'll get the PowerPoint back up so you can access it. You see here the objectives that will be shared with you throughout the hour and a half. Each of your presenters will talk about practical tips about how to most effectively provide support to children and caregivers of incarcerated parents. Throughout today's presentation, on a lot of the handouts, you will see the acronym COIP. That stands for Children of Incarcerated Parents. A couple of the presenters will talk about how juvenile delinquency is related to the incarceration of one or more parents and the impact it has on a child's well-being. And then finally, we will also discuss key elements of prevention, best practices, and connect with resources and tools to help faith-based and community leaders implement effective youth-focused programs. As I said earlier, there are a number of handouts in the handout pod. Please take the opportunity during the live event to upload those to your file so you'll have them for future reference. Again, we have an esteemed presentation panel. The first presenter will be Dr. Wilson Good Sr. of the Amachi Inc., followed by Catherine Tiarina with the Ridge Project, and Ms. Gaines will follow that up, and she represents the Osborne Association. Great presentation panel for a very interesting topic. Before we get started, a quick question, because I know we have a varied audience. And please use the toggle to the left of each question to respond. How many of you have been inside a prison or jail? You can answer yes, I was incarcerated. You can answer yes, I was a visitor. Yes, as a volunteer or staff person. Or perhaps 2 or more of the above are appropriate for your situation. And then again, maybe none of the above. So let's give you a few moments to answer that question, and it will provide our panel an opportunity to speak to you directly based on your experience. Thanks for taking a time to respond. I see that we have a number of people that volunteer or a number of folks that are on the webinar today are staff members at a prison or a jail facility. It looks like 84% of you represent that. About 76 of you as a visitor. We're going to give you just a few more seconds to respond to the poll. Okay, thank you for that. So, let's get started. Your first presenter is affectionately known as the father of the Children of Prisoners movement in the country. He organized AMACHI, which is an effective mentoring program for children of incarcerated parents. He began implementing the program in just 4 sections of Philadelphia, and soon thereafter, it was replicated nationwide. Without any further ado, Dr. Wilson Good Sr., President and CEO of AMACHI, Inc.
Michelle, thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be here and delighted to be a part of this discussion. Just want to let you know what I plan to do in the next 13 or 14 minutes. I want to give a background on children of prisoners and something about how to reduce intergenerational incarceration, and then a study of the AMACHI model, and then the significance of tailored training. Ms. Robinson from the White House talked a little bit about these numbers. Just want to repeat them briefly. Nationally, there are 1.7 million children currently have one or both parents in prison. And the figure which I like to look at also is that if you take those parents who are in jail, those parents who are in state prison, and those parents who are in federal prison, and those who are on probation or parole at the local, state, and federal level, you come up with more than 10 million children in that category. And this next one that talks about children of prisoners are 6 times more likely. There's some debate and discussion about whether that's true or not. One of the things I like to do is put forth what we get from research so that we can begin to deal with it. When we look at children of the incarcerated, we look at 3 areas. Whether or not when the parent goes off to prison, there is diminished academic performance, whether the grades go down, classroom behavior difficulty, and then truancy. And then as we go through working with these children, these young people, we also like to do a pre and post test and look at the grades when we start the process of mentoring, and look at the post when we finish the process, and we like to see whether or not there's been improvement in academic performance, improvement in school attendance, and improvement in behavior. Again, Ms. Robinson talked about some of the difficulty that children of prisoners have, separation and attachment issues, depression, anxiety, attention disorders, and developmental regression. All of those are true, acted out in a inappropriate manner, dealing with behavior issues, antisocial behavior, physical aggression, all those, and then there are issues of self-image, awareness, some social stigma, and we've found that especially with the children who have a mother in prison, there is normally more of an issue of social stigma, and then sometimes it brings about low self-esteem. Let me just make a point here that I am the son of an incarcerated father. And when I was 14, my father went to prison. And I spent my teen in a local church, and it was the pastor and his wife who helped me to regain my self-image, who helped me to go off to college. And so mentoring was a major part of what happened in my life. And so I just wanted to say that, so I speak as a kind of one who I believe can talk about this. And so many young people who grow up in communities adversely affected by poverty and crime. And I'd like to also say that even if there is not a parent in prison, that's children who are impacted by incarceration in their neighborhoods. And we like to believe that that a child who grew up in that environment is more likely to end up not graduating high school. And reports concluded that truancy is the most powerful predictor of delinquency that comes about. And truancy is frequently referred to as a kind of gateway offense. It is linked to status to delinquency activity and youth, negative behavior in adulthood, and an increased propensity for violence. I'm not going to go through all of these. I hope that you will take advantage of some of this information. I just want to move now to talk about what is the Amachi model. As you can see, it's people of faith, mentoring children of promise. And we don't use the word prisoner, we use the word promise, because we believe that all children have promise. And these are the three things that we think is important: faith-based, and which is rooted in a partnership between a well-established secular nonprofit agency, a faith-based nonprofit agency, or a local faith organization. It is based upon the big brothers, big sisters of one-to-one community-based mentoring, or school-based mentoring, or site-based mentoring, and sometimes we even deal with group-based mentoring. But the important thing for us is that it is research-based. It is performance-based. There is a strong component to ensure quality control. It's very, very important from our point of view that there is quality control. And we believe that we have to provide mentoring to these children so that the outcomes become more positive. And the public-private venture study in the 1990s, which is a bit old now, but I think it still applies, shows that youth in high-quality, long-lasting relationship demonstrate better school attendance, a greater likelihood of entering higher education, and a better attitude towards academics. And recently, one of our funded group in Michigan conducted a study that showed that 77% of the children participating in the Amachi program indicated their mentor made school more interesting. And in terms of grades, again, I mentioned that we like to deal with the grades. That an average GPA of youth increased from 2.65 to 2.94, and 62% of youth who pre-test schools indicated a below average, ended up that there was higher self-esteem for those young people as we went through it. So we think that mentoring is critical to these children. But we also believe strongly that support for caregivers to create mentoring matches that are longer in duration and stronger in quality, that we do this by engaging the caregivers, that support for caregivers must be a top priority. And 90% of children with an incarcerated father live with their mothers, according to the research that we've done. And half of the children with an incarcerated mother live with an grandmother. So we believe that in order to provide support for these caregivers, that we need to deal and make sure that the those who are working with these caregivers also is trained to make sure that they're culturally in line with what's going on, so that staff can better relate to caregivers, develop parent engagement networks to help grandparents manage a generation gap. And we know that there's a huge difference between when grandparents grew up, and I'm a grandparent, and I can tell you that that my grandchildren, that I had to learn how to communicate with them, not by conversation, but by my texts. So I learned how to text them, help caregivers navigate relationship with wraparound services. So I see that I have about 3 or 4 more minutes before I stop for question. I just want to indicate that the MACHA design and implementation is a traditional model of community-based mentoring with strong support from the faith community. The program followed the elements of effective practice by mentor, and the relationship is designed to last a minimum of 1 year. Youth are between the ages of 9 and 18 and must complete, before they become a part of the program, a pre-match orientation. And youth and parents must do a baseline and follow up with surveys. Again, some of this you can read, but there is I have 3 books that I've given to you, a fact sheet plus 2 books that you should read in order to hear more about what is going on here. Let me go to the last few slides here. Just indicate that we believe that there needs to be a design program for how you get the names of children. We establish relationship with the correctional institution, and we've found that the best way to get the names of children is by talking with the parents who are incarcerated. They're school administrators, they're social workers, they're law enforcement agencies, they're healthcare workers, angel tree churches, but the best way, from my point of view, is to talk with those who are caregivers, rather to talk with those who are in the prison. So the faith-based organization, congregation, recruit mentors from among those who are involved, and they have to agree to work 1 hour once a week for at least 1 year. Training is essential for all of this, and I'm going to just go to the end of this at this point and say that mentoring children of prisoners is just one piece of what needs to be done, and the 2 presenters that will follow me will tell you that as well. If we can organize to mentor children of prisoners, we can address the other needs of our society to build stronger and caring communities that nurture and protect all of the children and youth. I would just close by leaving my information up here on the website, on Facebook, and linked them and Amachi. And finally, with this close, that I went to a prison and I saw in that prison a grandfather, a father, and a grandson, all in the same prison at the same time. And they met for the first time in prison. And when I was about to leave, the grandson pulled me aside and said, "Dr. Good, I have a son that I've never seen. Do you think I will see him for the first time here?" In the communities that I work in and operate within, that is the reality. Thank you for listening, and I'm glad to be able to present this to you, and I'll be available now to answer questions if there are any.
You can better believe there are lots of questions, Dr. Good. Folks have been paying attention and hanging on every word. The first question that I have for you is this. Do you keep track of reserves, do you keep track of reserves? Are there children that have used your services or resources more than once because the parent was incarcerated more than once? And then the second part of that is, what is the success rate?
The success rate that we know is this, that based upon surveys we've done with 300 different agencies in all 50 states, the success rate is that 2/3 of those children who have a mentor for 1 hour once a week or 2 hours twice a month for at least 1 year, 2/3 of them improve their grades, 2/3 of them improve their behavior in school, and 2/3 of them improve their attendance at school. And 90% of them improve their relationship with their siblings, with their peers, and with the older folks in their home. And yes, we have repeats. We have children of incarcerated parents who've come to us 2 or 3 times, and the parent will come out, will go back in. So we've had repeat in that instance.
Thank you, Dr. Good. Another question. How do you ensure quality controls over application of the model of varying situations and contexts?
We want to make sure of 3 things. One is that they're using the Big Brother, Big Sisters model and the protocol for recruitment and making sure that that is done. 2, we want to make sure that there is training. And 3, we want to make sure that beyond the training, that there is, in fact, a pre and post test. We want to know whether or not what we do is making a difference. Because if we're not making a difference, then there's no need to do it. And so we use those 3 criteria to try and make sure that we're making a difference.
Okay, if I can get 2 more quick questions then. We've got some folks that are joining us today from the Philadelphia area, but we've got folks from all over the United States and even someone from Buenos Aires asking, how does one become involved in the Amachi program? Does your church have to have a program to get involved?
Number one, the Amachi program is not exclusively faith-based. And we put up and we showed our website, we showed our Facebook page, we showed our Twitter account. We have all various ways, and we're located in Philadelphia at 2210 South 71st Street with a phone number of 215-729-0248. But you really don't have to be a church. You don't have to be a congregation. You don't have to even work through churches. We work with all those who are concerned and interested in helping children with a parent in prison or who've been in prison.
Thank you so much, Dr. Good, appreciate the time and the attention to the questions. I suspect there'll be more questions towards the end. Our next presenter is Catherine Tiarina. Ms. Tiarina is the co-executive director and founder of the Ridge Project.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much, Dr. Good, for all of the work that you've done in helping children of incarcerated parents. It is a pleasure to be on this webinar today and to get to share a little bit about what we do here at the Ridge Project. We go from the aspect of impacting fathers, liberating generations. And so our primary mission is to build a legacy of strong families with a real emphasis on struggling families or at-risk families. And so we do this through fatherhood, healthy relationships, marriage, and family-centered reentry. We currently serve or have served thousands of incarcerated dads, and through them reach their children. We've been able to serve about 25,000 children of incarcerated parents through services to their dads. Our program is actually called Keeping Faith. It's families and inmates together in harmony, and our project consists of 4 basic modules. The first one is Tyro Dads, and this program really focuses in on helping the incarcerated father connect to their kids, because we absolutely agree that mentoring is extremely important. But we just want to make sure that mentoring is never used as a replacement for a connection to the incarcerated parent. It's extremely important to make sure that children of incarcerated parents have that connection to their parent. And so the Tyro Dads, we primarily work with fathers, and so we really teach the dad how to lead their children well. Then we go into communication courses, including conflict resolution, anger management, workforce ethics, and family activities and support groups. And so basically, our model is to stabilize families through the high 5. And the high 5 are friendship, faithfulness, forgiveness, fairness, and fortitude. Our program model, the Keeping Faith program, has been nationally recognized and is evidence-based program. We've been delivering this program now since 2002. And through friendship, we want to really build lasting bonds through fun and laughter. And that's something that's really difficult for children of incarcerated parents because they don't have a lot of joy and laughter in their lives. There's usually a lot of conflict and a lot of grief over the incarceration and the disintegration of their family or separation from the parent. And so it's extremely important to, 1, give them the permission to grieve, but 2, opportunities to laugh and to bond together as a family. So the second one is faithfulness, affirming your family's intrinsic value, demonstrating a steady allegiance to fulfilling your duty to protect, love, and defend them. And so through teaching faithfulness first to dad and then allowing him to understand how important it is to put that particular attribute and deposit that into his children by being faithful to them so that they can learn the importance of faithfulness in friendships and relationships, it gives them some tools to overcome all of the obstacles that they're dealing with. The third one is forgiveness, because every family, we say our own family is imperfectly healthy and happy. So every family needs forgiveness because it's full of imperfect people, but especially among those with an incarcerated parent. My husband was incarcerated for 15 years, and my sons were 2 and 4 when he went to prison. And I will tell you, learning forgiveness towards everybody, including people in society for the social discrimination, towards my husband for the choices he made, towards each other for not always making the right choices and decisions and honoring each other, was really, really important in building a legacy of strong family for us. Fairness, learning to see in our circumstances the opportunity to use effective communication skills to resolve conflict and strengthen our relationships. And when we think about fairness, typically, we hear often from the caregivers of incarcerated fathers or the children of incarcerated fathers, this isn't fair. Why me? Why is it that I have to have this broken family? And why is it that I have to be suffering such extreme discrimination because my parents incarcerated and now doors are closing to me? And we just say, you know what? Life isn't fair. But if we can teach our families that we work with that fairness is not defined by what happens to us, but fairness is defined by how we respond to that, then we can help them develop those attributes and those characteristics to overcome life obstacles. And then the fifth one is really fortitude. the strength of mind, will, and purpose that enables a family to courageously face danger and endure pain or adversity together. By creating connections with the incarcerated parent and their children through letter writing, through videos, through family days, through supporting visits, and connecting them to mentors in the community and connecting them to other resources in the community, they begin to develop the fortitude that helps them to break those generational cycles of incarceration, of poverty, of fatherlessness, of even teen pregnancy. As we move forth working with our families, one of the really important and key things that we need to do is each family, we provide intensive case management around them to identify what it is that they need. As Dad is going through the program on the inside, we also take the caregiver through the program and have family days and connections with the kids and connect them to resources on the outside. So we're equipping fathers, we're connecting children, we're teaching leadership, and creating economic stability activities so that as Dad transitions back into the home, so we do the program inside, make connections with the family while Dad is still incarcerated, and then transition the whole family through that very important transitional period. That first 6 to 9 months when Dad first gets released, it's extremely important that the support is around them as they navigate these new relationships or reintegration of the family. So the overview of our strategy is engaging dads, building family strength, activating the high five, and assuring ongoing support, opportunities for continuing development, 12 months of case management and follow-up. That's really important. As the support groups while Dad's incarcerated help us build that bond, begin to do case management and home visits, so that as Dad gets home, we get to celebrate the reintegration of Dad into the family. And then we have ongoing accountability through our Tyro accountability fraternities that allows our Tyro dads to continue to stay connected and rely on each other. It's like a peer group mentoring. So we can really surround them with community supports and other supports. It's called going above and beyond, and then some. Here is the final statement in one of our evaluations, and you can see there from the Midwest Evaluation Research. When our family days, I had a short video and we couldn't get it up here. I don't think it's going to be up here, but you will be able to access it. Michelle has said that there'll be a place that you'll be able to go and you can actually see the importance. You just see as these kids, the first time that they've had a chance to throw a football with Dad, the first time that they've been able to play a game and really engage in fun and laughter, and really watching, as you can see the difference as the kids come in and then you see them in the middle of the activities. And you know what? Oh, it is there. Okay, that's great. If we could play it now, that would be great. Is this playing? So that was a brief video of a family day. We get to do family days across prisons in the state of Ohio. Every week we have 60 classes going on across the state. 15 of them are inside prisons, and then in addition to those we have them in jails, in treatment centers, halfway houses, as we work really hard to connect children of incarcerated parents to their families. Some of the key questions, we really focus on communication with dads. And so we wanted to share some of our results, our pre and post surveys with you on how communicating with their families without getting angry, really building those bonds with healthy communication, how they're learning to navigate through the relationship with their partner, whether it's a spouse or whether it's just the caregiver or the mother of the children. And when our talks begin to get out of hand, how the dads are really learning self-control. As you can see, the difference from pre to post is really significant. So they learn to better be able to communicate with their children. I also want to share with you our recidivism rate. And these are old rates for Ohio. Ohio has actually got it going on. And so in Ohio, the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, I think our 3-year recidivism rate right now is down to about 28. And so we wanted to compare all of the tyros, all of the guys that enrolled in the program. And so theirs is actually a little bit higher than the state average. But if they completed 3 or more classes, they were at 27% recidivism at 3 years. And if they actually completed the Tyro Dads class, we were at 12.5% at 3 years, which is really significant. I really want to end my presentation with this poem. It's called My Son's Poem. And I want to encourage you, please feel free to use this. It is copywritten. I will give you permission to use this. My son was, as I said, 4 years old, my oldest son, when Ron went to prison. And so as you read this poem, I mean, this poem could be written by any child of an incarcerated parent. They go through this season of, just, loving their dad or mom and feeling like, that's still their hero, and this loss and this grief. And then they go through that and then into anger and into frustration. I know my sons were the first ones that tell me they felt like they were living a dual life, because they got to go in and visit their dad and feel like they were an intact family. But then they would come back out into the community and they would be fraught with all of these negative, responses from community about, how they should be ashamed or embarrassed of their dad, and very little support in allowing them to love their parent and build a relationship with them. And so as we built this program based on the things that weren't available for our family, we're hearing the same stories over and over again, and how grateful families are to have an organization and a program that can come around them and support them through the incarceration, through the reunification, and help them develop the strategies and the things that they need to develop in order to be able to overcome all of their hurdles. As you read the poem, you'll see that even after my husband came home, Blake says, what is everyone thinking? So happy, so clueless, pain slinking around, threatening my very being. And so he's just saying, he thought all of these years, for those 15 years, that Ron coming home would just erase all of the pain, and it didn't. And so that was a real struggle for my sons to be able to overcome that and recognize that healing takes time, and that reconnection and bonds take time to rebuild, but it's very worth the effort. And so now we get to take our experience and we get to magnify that, thousands and thousands of times over in the state of Ohio, and now duplicated in the state of Texas. And we get to be those ambassadors of hope. One of our most wonderful moments was recently. My husband and daughter and I were out in the community at a play, and a man came up to us, he and his daughter, and they were not people he was not someone that we had been able to teach. And we have, as I said, facilitators all over the state of Ohio. And so he came up and he says, wait a minute, aren't you those people? And we looked and we were like, well, what do you mean? He says, well, aren't you the original Tyro? And Ron turns around and he says, yeah, you know what, we are. And he broke down crying, scooped up his little girl who was 6 years old, and he said, Princess, this is the man, these are the people that gave me back to you. And he said, you know what, I am home now, and I'm doing everything I need to do to be connected to my children, and I just want to thank you. And so I want to encourage you that you may be the only face of hope that these children see in their community, the only place where they are actually accepted and loved. You may be the only ambassador of hope to these families. And so I want you to really think about that and take that seriously and ask yourself, what is it I can do to really bring hope to the families that I'm wanting to serve? For more information about the Ridge Project, here's my email and our organizational email and our website. Please, check out our website where you can find our LinkedIn and Twitter. And please don't hesitate to contact us. I also want to let you know the high fives that we shared. My son Brandon, who was 2 actually when Ron went to prison, my husband and I and my son Brandon wrote this book called The High Five, and you can actually get it for free right now if you go to highfivebook.com, and you can order a free copy of it. And we'd love to have you use it as a tool to reach out and help other families. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Catherine. Lots of questions for you as well. As a nationally recognized expert in the field of relationships, healthy marriage, fatherhood, and youth development, how do you get families involved in these programs that have for generations decided to resolve their issues from within their own family?
You know, that was when we first started, we thought that that would be our most major challenge. But we found that as we went, we actually recruit inside the institution and engage dad first, and then dad connects us to the caregiver and the children and creates that segue. And so we actually have, recruitment is not an issue. We've got, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 applications on file that haven't even had a first class yet, that are on those waiting lists. And so recruitment, once you go in and they understand that you're really there to help them bridge this and create a better future for themselves, our program is voluntary, and recruitment really is not an issue because we start with dad, who's locked up and is really looking for an answer and how to protect his children from where he is.
Thank you for that. Several people have said that the video actually left a lump in their throat. How will the video visitation impact family relationships, and will it be more difficult for poor families?
Video visitation, at the last resort, we recommend video visitation if you really cannot connect the families face-to-face. Because of the release of hormones, bonding hormones, in touch, I mean, even just a hug, holding hands, skin-to-skin contact is so important, especially for children. And so the most important thing is to try to connect those children to their incarcerated parent face-to-face. And then if you cannot absolutely do that, then video visitation is the next best thing, and letter writing is extremely important. So we really encourage civic and faith-based organizations to develop programs that actually help offset the cost of visitation and phone calls, because understanding that this is an investment in families, and we just don't believe that there's any such thing as a disposable or castaway family. Every family has the opportunity, traditional, non-traditional families, to be reconciled and to be healthy and whole and strong.
Thank you. And one more question before we move to our next presenter. What is Tyro Dad's success ratio with securing work beyond 90 days?
That is a great question. And I'd like to also say, because I forgot to say what Tyro stands for. Tyro is a Latin word that means apprentice, novice, someone learning something new, a warrior, or a founding father. And we have had really phenomenal success. And in each industry, it really differs in industry. With our CDL program, we have a 96% placement rate, and that has held past the 90 days. We have a CDL training program inside the institution, so as they come out, they have their CDL. We also work with them after they've already been released. We've done welding. We have a farm-to-plate culinary arts program, and we've had really phenomenal success in placement and retention because of the Tyro Accountability Fraternity and the ongoing case management and the connection with the family.
Okay, Catherine, we're going to ask you one more question because we have a little time here and we're doing well. I'm going to have you repeat what Tyro stands for one more time.
Sure. Tyro is a Latin word that means apprentice, novice, someone learning something new, a warrior, or a founding father.
Okay, and to close out this segment, what are some obstacles, if you could name maybe 2 or 3 obstacles that prevent faith communities from becoming more actively involved in working with the families of the incarcerated? Name 2 or 3 things that create barriers for the faith community getting involved.
Yeah, I think the first one, really is, and I mean it in the most sincere form of the word, is really an ignorance of the need, of the great need. And then the second thing is that a lot of families live in shame and embarrassment, and so they're in hiding. And so that's why it's so important to connect with the institutions, connect with the incarcerated parent, who will then connect you to their families. Because we find often when we do presentations in churches or civic groups or even in schools that people are shocked to find out how many people right there in their community have an incarcerated parent because they're living with a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle, or in foster care, and they don't realize the whole circumstance surrounding this child's life. And so I think that those two are major barriers, or can be.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Our next presenter is Miss Elizabeth Gaines, who's the Executive Director with the Osborne Association. Ms. Gaines, the Osborne Association is a multi-service nonprofit that implements and champions solutions that reduce the damage caused by crime and incarceration. Ms. Gaines?
I think, great job of talking about the program, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I will just say that at Osborne, we do both advocacy. We lead the New York Initiative on Children of Incarcerated Parents, which is a partnership of 65 agencies, government, nonprofit, faith-based, and academic institutions that represent all aspects of government and community to focus on this issue, because children of incarcerated parents don't belong to one agency. They may be in school, they may be in the mental health system, they could be in no system at all. And so we have an advocacy agenda, and we've also been providing services. Osborne established actually the first comprehensive parenting program in a men's state prison in the United States almost 30 years ago, Family Works, which still operates. And I'm not going to really describe the program other than to say that our view is that we want to do comprehensive services. So it's parenting for the incarcerated parent, but it's also services for the caregiver in the community. We run children's centers, family centers in the visiting rooms in prisons. And so we're trying to really embrace the entire family. We're in 20 jails and prisons around New York State, and the programs vary tremendously with healthy marriage and televisiting and bringing visitors. But my focus here really is because not everyone is going to start the Ridge Project or the Osborne Association or Amachi. And there's so many things that anybody can do from whatever agency you're in. So I want to make sure that people are not discouraged, because most kids are they're going to be in school, or they're going to be in preschool, or they may be in any number of systems and can be really supported by any number of folks. So my colleague Ann Adelist-Estrin often says children of incarcerated parents are in some ways like all other children, like some other children, and like no other children. And what we kind of mean like that is like they're all like all kids. They love their parents. They want to be loved by their parents. Like some other children, parental incarceration is considered an adverse childhood experience, but it's not the only one. There are many, and living in various other situations, parents that might be using drugs, mental health situations, those kind of combine. So some kids are going to be in where parental incarceration is just one of many things that they're struggling with. They're also like no other children, which is that experience of having a parent taken away and go to prison is quite distinct. My children were 2 and 6 when their father went to prison, and he was there for 25 years. And when I first had that experience, I tried to get help for them, and the only sort of therapists that were available would tell me things like, well, it's just like any other abandonment. That's how we would treat it. And we started to realize that there really was very little understanding of the distinctions. Our pediatrician, the only thing he could think of was, well, maybe we should get extra TB shots, because if they're going into the jail, they'll be exposed to illness. Or people would interact like, well, if their parent is incarcerated, that they are maybe more likely to be incarcerated, so they're bad, and if they're in the classroom, they may be seen as being the source of trouble. As Dr. Wood pointed out, the research as to whether these kids are more likely to be incarcerated is very vague, and I think completely untrue. But more than that, it stigmatizes kids. So comprehensive programs are great, but we don't need to have a comprehensive program in order for everyone, whether you're a correction officer or a guidance counselor, to understand things like these common feelings and emotions that children with parents in prison may have. They're somewhat self-explanatory, right? Fear, anxiety, and worry. One of the big worries that they have is that the other parent may be taken away. That fear of, particularly if kids have seen the arrest. After my kid's dad went to prison, they would watch the speedometer in my car like excessively and be very worried about my speeding, because they thought if I was speeding, that was breaking the law and I would be pulled over and I would be taken away. They actually started calling my son Velcro because it was like he was attached to me. And so those kinds of feelings, sadness and isolation, are ones in which we learned to address. My daughter sort of became the poster child for children of incarcerated parents and discovered that by reaching out to other young people with the same experience was a wonderful way to deal with it. But we realized that for a lot of kids, they never wanted to tell anybody, and therefore they were particularly isolated. Anger, guilt. A lot of kids feel that they might have done something that caused their parents to use or commit a crime. The kids who think, if I hadn't asked for that bicycle, Dad wouldn't have stolen anything to try to buy it for me. Stigma and shame, our other presenters have referenced that. It's very real. And there's a kind of a myth that kids who live in some communities where there's a lot of high incarceration rates don't feel that, but it's not true. They know that their parent did something, and then people look at them like they may be, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, so they may not want to share that. Values confusion is, in general, parents go to prison for things that someone at least has told the child is not the right thing to do. So you love the parent, you don't love what he or she did, but we all know that that's not the most effective parenting technique, is to say, do as I say, not as I do. So it's confusing for kids. And it's confusing with roles. Lots of times, Dad goes to prison, and somebody says to a 9-year-old boy, well, you're the man of the house now, which is a lot of pressure to put on a kid. And resentment about deception. My children almost never forgave us because we did not tell them the truth about how long their father would be incarcerated. I thought it would be too much for them to handle, but as it turns out, they remembered what we'd said and felt like they couldn't necessarily rely on us. So that means that we needed to really address those kinds of feelings. Prison is just one part of the impact on kids that we've seen. Arrest, pre-trial and during trial, there's all those other kind of stresses. At sentencing, we've discovered amazingly that even though everybody else seems to realize that this person is going to go to prison, often the family seems shocked, not quite prepared for that. During incarceration is when a lot of programs begin to operate, but by then there's already may have been some damage to the family. We've seen huge stresses related to when people are up for parole, because the kids are hoping and praying that dad or mom is going to make parole, and then they have to wait, and they find out, no, it's another year or 2 years or however long, and they sort of pull themselves together for that process, and sometimes get additional anger because they feel like if my parent was doing the right thing in prison, they would let him out, not realizing that parole isn't that reasonable. And then release and reentry, for some people, that's the hardest time. A lot of kids imagine that their parents are going to come home and live with them. And, one of the things I love about the Ridge Project, I think it really focuses well on families that are going to be reunited. But for us, we're seeing lots of families where the parent's not going to be coming home to the same place. And so the child has been assuming that would happen and then finding out that it doesn't. Kids are different. This is probably not a surprise to any parents. And the time of the incarceration may depend a lot on the age of the child, how the rest of the family is handling it, how much disruption. We've certainly seen much more so with women who go to prison. The child is much more likely to have to be taken out of one home, brought to another home. Kids are different. Some kids are facing a very long sentences, and we're really helping them adjust to having that parent pretty much be a parent from prison for the rest of his or her childhood. which is, in our view, not a bad thing. Sometimes I think people feel like you can't parent from prison, but, as we used to tell our kids, except for coaching soccer, most of the important things parents can do, you can do from anywhere. Children ask the same questions over and over. And by the way, in our experience, they ask them again and again, even after they've been answered. But they're critical. And again, this is very important for programs that are not full-service programs, but you're the teacher or some other important person in the child's life. Kids want to know to the incarcerated parent, where are you? A lot of people don't want to answer that question. And they certainly don't want to answer, why are you there? Tough for kids. It's easier for kids probably to hear it than it is for many parents to admit it. When are you coming home is often a very hard question to answer. Most states and counties don't have exact release dates. When they do, it's great. It's very much more really wanting to be reassured, are you okay? Children have questions they don't ask. Is this my fault? Do you blame me? Do you love me? Those don't seem like questions they should have, but we've seen those questions over and over again. Our colleagues in San Francisco, who really done extraordinary work advocating for children of incarcerated parents, talk about the importance of a truth fit to tell, of being able to really work with parents to have something that they can say to their children that is truthful but isn't necessarily frightening. Now, what we see is that what anybody can do for kids is to acknowledge and validate the experience. Anybody who's lost a parent to death knows that there are those people that don't know what to say to you, so they don't say anything, and you'd really like it if they would just say, I'm really sorry about your loss. That's what happens when people know that people have parents in prison sometimes, or family members in prison, is they don't want to acknowledge or validate the experience. They think if they just ignore it, it'll go away. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, and it's really more helpful for most kids if they know, if we were aware of what they may be going through, and to signal in some way that you are someone that they can talk to about the incarceration, that they don't have to be embarrassed and ashamed. There's a lot of ways, although there are programs in New York and Ohio and many other states, in many places there just aren't going to be. So if this is going to be for mentors or for teachers or for any of your organizations that may not be full service children of incarcerated parents programs, you can support efforts to keep parents connected. The photo here is a televisiting that Osborne has. We can connect children to 4 prisons in New York State. It's free. It's supported by our corrections department. But I think I really want to underline what Catherine said, which is that this is not to be a substitute for full-on contact. And I'm very concerned about this because there is a lot of push by the telecom companies to engage corrections in how much cheaper and easier it would be to just have video communications rather than contact visiting. And so we have a lot of concerns about that. We're very lucky in New York. There are 7-day-a-week contact visits in all of our maximum security prisons and weekend visits other places. We have, New York has a family reunion program that involves overnight visiting. And this was in stark contrast to my children's father was incarcerated in Virginia, which has, and with my apologies to anybody on here that may be from Virginia, the visiting is horrible by comparison. And it was very difficult for us to have to make those 12-hour trips and deal with that. But there's always a possibility. So people are concerned very often. Courts and others sometimes discourage maintaining contact and relationships. I think it's very important to note that the research is very clear that staying connected to parents to whom you are attached is important. It benefits children. It certainly benefits incarcerated parents. The research in all of our programs, and I'm sure the Ridge Project and others, demonstrate that parents who stay connected to their children and families lower recidivism rates, fewer infractions, and it benefits families to be able to operate as families. It's tricky to support positive visiting experiences, but anyone can do it. You can prepare children and the caregivers. When children don't want to visit, then sometimes maybe they don't for a while. Our daughter decided at 12 that she wanted nothing to do with her father, and we said nothing for about a year, and she went back by herself. These 10 tips for professionals, they're in our handbooks, and I think are partly thanks to Deanne Newell and others who've prepared things like that. In fact, almost everything I've said has been borrowed or begged from colleagues. I think they mentioned the Champions of Change. If you go to the White House about that, virtually all of our colleagues who've been doing this work for a long time, Centerforce and Friends Outside and folks in Pittsburgh, and lots of people are doing great work around this and have great programs that are worth taking a look at. But this is for anyone to work with caregivers and to encourage visits, to prepare them, to assist the parent in preparing for the visit and using it. In our televisiting program, we actually televisit first with the incarcerated parent to prepare that parent for a visit. And some really specific things, like make sure that before you start traveling out into the world that the parent is actually still in the facility. They transfer people a lot, and there's nothing worse than arriving at a prison and being told, oops, not happening. Being non-judgmental and open-minded is probably the most important one. I want to have a minute to say that courtesy of some kids and wonderful supportive adults in San Francisco, children came together to create a Bill of Rights for children of incarcerated parents. It's important to realize that it's not just about what kids need, but they also are entitled to a relationship. The United States is the only country other than Somalia that hasn't signed on to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And so these are ones that are important: to be kept safe and informed at the time of my parents' arrest, to be heard when decisions are made about me, the child, the right to be considered when decisions are made about my parent, the right to be well cared for in my parent's absence. I have the right to speak with, see, and touch my parent, the right to support as I struggle with my parents' incarceration, and the right not to be judged, blamed, or labeled because of my parents' incarceration, either to be seen as a problem or, 15 years ago when my daughter, I think, was still a teenager, language is important. They wanted her to speak at some NIC satellite conference called Children of Prisoners, Children at Risk. And she said, I'm not a child at risk, I'm a child at promise, and I'm not going to come unless you change the name of the conference, which they did. And that label has stuck, and it's important to the language. It's why we don't call people offenders. We call them people who are in prison. The last is the most important, and then I'm closing. I have the right to a lifelong relationship with my parent. And this material in great detail is available in our handbooks on our website. Thank you.
Liz, thank you so much. Great information from our panel. And let's have a few more questions before we move to close. And thank you so much for all of you who are hanging with us. Let's start with a question that I just got a second ago. Doesn't COIP label children? The acronym COIP, Children of Incarcerated Parents. Liz, does that label children?
I'm sorry that I did not hear the first part of the question. My whole screen thing went blank. Say that again, please.
The question is, doesn't COIP, the acronym COIP, label children?
Yes, it does, and I don't use it. I've not even seen it. I mean, we use it internally as an acronym, but if you mean, does even talking about the fact that children have a parent in prison label them, I guess it could. That's probably why most of our programs are named things like, our programs are called Family Ties, Family Works. We have a youth advisory board, and we have we have a support. We do retreats for women who are intimate partners of people who are in prison, and we call it LOL, Loving Out Loud. So yes, it is important to not just always reference incarceration.
Thank you.
This is Wilson Good. I think it's important that we know that children who have a parent in prison are children of promise. And Amachi is a word that means who knows but what God has brought us through this child. Who knows but what God has brought us through this child. And so that's important, I think, that we not label children at all, but that we focus on their assets, not their liabilities, and we focus on their promise as children, and that's very, very important.
I agree, and actually, in my view, from my own children's experience and from what I can tell of Catherine's and many of the kids we work with, they don't only have, special problems. They have certain assets. They've learned things. They've been exposed to a world that many kids have not been, and have learned a kind of tolerance for an understanding that a person can do something wrong and not be a bad person. They've learned to love somebody that they know that the world doesn't feel good about. Those are strengths that help them in life, too.
Thank you both for answering that question. Liz, this is a question for you. How should the incarcerated parent answer the question of where they are when the parent at home has not shared with the children the truth about the incarceration?
That's tricky, and we deal with that all the time. I think the real important part here is to really work with the parent at home, to be able to really share why it is that it is important to have the child understand, because the kid will figure it out. Children are many things, but not stupid. And if it's particularly the mail arrives and it says it's coming from a correctional institution. A collect call comes in, it says, will you accept a call from a correctional facility? If you go through the gates, it says correctional facility, do not bring in contraband. It's very difficult to maintain the contact, and sometimes kids go along with their parents and pretend that they don't know for years because the parents don't seem able to say it, and they like to say that he's on vacation, he was away at school, he's in the Army. It's very important to persuade the caregiving family that the truth of where the person is in the end, if it can be told in a way, it does not have to be every detail of the crime. The new Sesame Street video, which I think is referenced in your handouts, but if not, you can go to Sesame and get it, where the new Muppet Alex, who describes having a parent in prison, really shows the importance of that. It also convincing the caregiving parent that the child could get more support if he knew what it was that was keeping the parent away. In particular, because it's not actually good for children to think that the child could be with them and is choosing not to be. For many kids, it would be a lot healthier to realize, listen, I would be there if there was any way that I could be. I wouldn't be going off to school or off to Job Corps or off to the Army for years and years and never see you. So this is why you can't just have a parenting program in a jail or a parenting program in the community. You have to integrate these things so that you're dealing with an entire family, not just the child.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. And again, for those of you who have not taken an opportunity to look at some of the handouts, the reference that Ms. Gaines was alluding to is one of your handouts in the handout pod. It's called Little Children, Big Challenges. It's a Sesame Street document. So some great resource information for you there. Here's a question that I want to ask really quickly of Catherine. I'm sorry, I'm saying Catherine, but I mean Liz. Around the isolation imposed on children, is the isolation self-imposed, or is there an environmental isolation that children feel even though they are not in the prison itself?
I think kids, and I'm sure Catherine and Dr. Good have seen this as well, it's not just self-imposed. Sometimes kids move out for a minute, like when my kids started to tell people, too many people, that their father was in prison. They got smacked a little bit. I thought it would be a good idea to tell their teachers. Then as soon as something was missing in the classroom, it was like, well, it must be Ari because his dad's in prison. So they got kind of smacked down for sharing this. for people's negative opinions about it. So they got, my kids were like in 7 different schools, and toward the end they stopped telling anybody. So it was self-imposed because they had seen enough, had enough experiences of having that response of people kind of raised eyebrows. Even people who should know better, even people who've experienced it themselves, there's still that kind of way that people interact with them that makes them feel like, let me get back in my cage, which is why we do so much work of support groups of children together and group mentoring and activities where our youth advisory board, we actually have all these kids with parents in prison, and we take them to Albany to lobby on policy issues that affect them around child-sensitive arrest policies and keeping parents closer to home and sort of building up their relationships with each other so that they have a safe space in life where they don't have to isolate.
Thank you, Liz. And here is a question for the panel. It may be our last question, so if each of you could weigh in on this, starting with Dr. Good. With research around importance of contact, what do you recommend for death row and other inmates who are not allowed to have contact or televisiting with their children? What are some of the recommendations? Dr. Good?
Yes, I would recommend letters. I would recommend not only letters, I recommend that we send cards because there's not many things that you can do. But I also would recommend that organizations that work with these children would have a special session. We've had, for example, with Amache, we've had a special session where we've had people who in life and who are in confinement who cannot have visitors. We've brought the children in and kind of talked with them about what was going on, and that became very, very important in that regard. And so I think that that what I've seen is that you have to tailor the program to the situation that you have, and you have to keep thinking about new and creative ways of keeping these children in contact with what's happening with their parents.
Great. Catherine, can you weigh in on that as well? Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think absolutely it's still important, particularly for the children, to maintain contact. I agree with letters, card writing. Also, they can, something that works well is if the dad at death row can find, or the mom can find books that they can read, and they can send information about the books, and they can both be reading the same book, so as the letter comes back and forth, they can talk about it. We recommend dad read ahead of the kids. But then they have something in common, or maybe that they're watching the same TV show. And I also loved, gosh, tell you what, it's just an honor to be with Dr. Good and with Liz Gaines on this panel. So I could have said yes, yes, yes to everything that they were saying. It's a good thing it was muted. But the Sesame Street, they just did a really great job. And I think that would be a really great resource for children to have, regardless of the situation of incarceration. So inclusive of dad or mom is on death row, to kind of help them navigate through some of the things that they have and recognize that they're not alone. Great resource for caregivers. So I think finding activities that they can do through the mail is a great way to stay connected.
A lot of great suggestions, Catherine. Liz, let's have you respond to that, and then I have one more question for the panel.
Okay, I would just say that separate and apart from what we do on an individual basis, on these kinds of issues, it is so important to become advocates and to see that it's the child's right to have the visit. This isn't a reward for someone on death row. We have to stop thinking that visiting is something, and contact is something that's like a perk, like giving them television and making prisons nice. The right to a relationship with a parent resides with the child, and we should be in our state capitals or in our nation's capital saying that prisoners, people who are incarcerated, whatever they've done is not a reason to punish their children, and to make sure that whatever those circumstances are, kids have the right to see, speak with, and touch their parents.
Excellent. Here's a very profound question that I think is a great way to wrap up this hour-and-a-half presentation. And we certainly appreciate all of you who've stayed with us. We're going to ask you to stay with us another 5-6 more minutes so you can respond to the evaluation. But someone asked the question, how do we find children who actually need our help as it relates to this topic? We're going to start with Liz Gaines answering that, and then move to Dr. Good, and then Catherine Tiarina having the last response. Again, how do we find children who need our help?
Well, I would say, first of all, they're everywhere, and what I had said about sending a signal that you are someone, that you are a safe person, in a school, you put up posters, you say you can't go around and ask kids, but we had a young woman whose father was in prison, went to do a presentation at school, and she asked the kids in the class how many kids had a parent in prison, and one person, after she shared her experience, she asked it again, 12 kids did. They're everywhere. If you create a safe environment, children will come forward. But I also agree with Dr. Good and Catherine, really, which is if you start on the insides of the jails and prisons, incarcerated people will certainly tell you about their children if they trust you. But again, there's all kinds of ways with posters in schools and preschools and Head Start and all of the foster care agencies. If you signal you're an ally in some way, kids will come forward and share their experience.
Yes, I believe that the #1 way to find children of the incarcerated is to talk directly with the parent who is in prison, especially mothers who are in prison. I've been to 42 prisons in 42 different states, and I've found that of all the things that I've done in terms of getting the names of children of incarcerated, that the personal contact, I would walk in and I would say, I'm here on behalf of your children. I'm here on behalf of your children. And once I did that, mothers and fathers, more often than not, began to share the names of their children. So I would just say that for a large number of names of children, for large programs, that the prison itself, the incarcerated parent, is the best way to develop that information.
Catherine, do you have any final comments on how to get children?
Yeah, I completely agree. Really great answers, and completely concur with both Liz Gaines and Dr. Good. The one other way that we've been able to identify and recruit children was I did a school assembly, and during the school assembly we talked about good choices just in general, and then shared my family story and read my son's poem. And the next day we had the guidance counselor at the school call us and said, before you came and did this full school assembly, I knew of and thought that I only had 6 children that had an incarcerated parent in our entire school. And this is a very rural area, this one school that I'm talking about right now. And he said, after you came, he says, I had child after child after child. He says, I've had dozens of kids come out of the school of 500. And he said, and share with me that they have an incarcerated mother, incarcerated father, and the whole circumstance. And so, that's something else if you don't have access to. I mean, absolutely agree, the first and best place to go is directly to the parents. But if you don't have access to the parents, then the second, my second would say, do a school assembly and talk about it, and then leave your information with the guidance counselor, and the kids will show up.
Thank you so much. We only have a minute or two left. I certainly want to thank the panel, Dr. Good, Ms. Gaines, and Ms. Tiarina. Thank you to our esteemed panel for sharing so many resources and the great information. We, of course, ran out of time. There were so many great questions still yet to be answered, but all of you have the contact information. I certainly encourage you to reach out directly to each of our panel and ask those questions directly and avail yourselves of the great resources and their expertise. This event will be archived for you to pay it forward in about 10 business days. at www.intact.org. Click on the Online University tab to access all the information, which will include the PowerPoint, the handouts, the transcript, as well as the audio recording. For more information, please see these contacts that are here on your screen. Obviously, the U.S. Department of Justice Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships was the host, along with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Thanks to both of those OJP government offices for supporting these great events, and it's up to you to ask for more. So you know who your contacts are. Please feel free to reach out to those offices to access their websites as well with additional information. We here at the OJJDP National Training and TA Center, thanks again for your support. Please take just 5 minutes to complete this evaluation, which you see on your screen right now. If you cannot access it, it is noted in your PowerPoint. Please copy and paste that URL in your web browser, and the evaluation document will pop up. It will only take you 5 minutes. We are eager to hear your feedback and how we can serve you better in the future. Again, thank you so much. Have a great day and a productive week.